Concourt has spent the entire day listening to oral arguments on why the EFF and ATM believe the National Assembly acted irrationally and unlawfully when it did not proceed with an impeachment process against President Cyril Ramaphosa. This is over the theft of foreign currency at his Phala Phala farm. The Red Berets are seeking to amend the rules which govern the procedure of removing a sitting head of state, while the ATM believes the sixth administration did not adequately explore the allegations and evidence provided in the Section 89 panel report. But the National Assembly, its Speaker and the President have argued that Ramaphosa has faced sufficient accountability and the matter was voted on in a lawful manner. Newzroom Afrika's senior politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo has more from the Constitutional Court.
The delay by the EFF to only challenge the National Assembly's decision not to forge ahead with an impeachment process against President Cyril Ramaphosa was a question raised several times by justices of the Constitutional Court. The Red Berets were also questioned why they didn't try to amend the rules governing the removal of a head of state in the House instead of inviting the apex court to possibly breach the sacrosanct principle of separation of powers. The EFF believes the ANC abused its then majority in the sixth administration to thwart attempts for the process to continue, therefore making the independent panel report valid and still worth exploring, even in the seventh administration.
In terms of the relief we seek two alternative amendment relief. It's either that the first stage becomes automatic, so in other words, where a panel says prima facie case box ticked, then that must automatically go to the committee, and the committee decides innocence or guilt. Or we say that Parliament must go and amend the rule to include factors, because those factors will then appropriately fetter the discretion that Parliament brings to bear when it makes this decision. So that's the amendment.
In support of the EFF, the African Transformation Movement maintains that the National Assembly ignored the veracity of the independent panel's conclusions and rushed to vote without enough evidence.
How can the ANC come along and say, we're not voting for this report because there are other pending proceedings with nothing to do with the National Assembly? So I start off by saying the ANC's primary reasoning in paragraph 5, and I'll come to how it fits in with the reasoning of the problem with the report. They say they didn't have, and it's in the report itself, the court will see, that the evidence hadn't been complete by these other bodies. Well, what could the ANC have done rationally? They could have said to Parliament, let's wait, let's postpone the vote. But how can they vote down a resolution on the basis of other pending proceedings in other bodies, other state institutions? And we say that in and of itself is the height of irrationality.
In its own defense, the National Assembly and its Speaker believe the rules that guide an impeachment process make it very clear that the function of the independent panel is to give advice and not binding on the House.
If the panel's findings and recommendation are binding on the Assembly, then you will be taking, if that is the finding of this court, you'll be taking out of the hands of the Assembly the assessment of whether there is sufficient evidence for the President to go on trial, and we submit that is inconsistent with Section 55(2) of the Constitution. We submit it is any such order with respect would entail an infringement of the principle of separation of powers.
President Cyril Ramaphosa's lawyer has argued that there has actually been an attempt to hold the first citizen accountable by virtue of even instituting the process wherein he was asked to explain himself before an independent panel.
And the President was called to account. The EFF's complaint, real complaint, is that it doesn't like the result or the outcome of the process.
The ANC's lawyer argued that the independent panel's findings hinged on unreliable information. This led to a lengthy debate with Justice Owen Rogers around if there's a difference between prima facie evidence and sufficient evidence.
The panel is not a court of law, and so it's unhelpful to make references to standards in civil proceedings or in criminal proceedings. The panel is a tribunal, a subcommittee of Parliament, a committee established by Parliament.
Judgment has been reserved. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo in Braamfontein.